Hello friends, Dr. Larry Mitnaul, your friendly neighborhood child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. So you've probably seen the news about the Vogue magazine cover, which was promoted as having a mental health theme. In the image, your eyes are kind of drawn to a woman, portrayed by a model, who's sitting naked and huddled in the middle of an old white tub. Two women stand beside her in sterile, old-fashioned nursing gowns. One of the nurses stares distantly, almost unaware of the vulnerable woman, while the other appears a little bit colder, with eyes fixed on the water that she's slowly dripping over this presumed psychiatric patient's head. So Vogue Portugal, in a press release, stated that, their intention was to shine a light on the important issue of mental health. So here, we'll review a few things you may want to know about this headline, facts around the stigma of mental health, and ways you can contribute to ending the stigma. So you'll want to stay to the end to hear how you can start being also a force for good in this mission. And speaking of force for good, I can already think of one thing you can do to get started in bringing solid, evidence-based psychiatric knowledge to the world, and that is by smashing the like button. I know. So doing so truly helps us to reach our mission of supporting kids, adults, and families, and all those who care for them to live lives of hope and resilience. So thanks for joining in the mission and completing one more good deed for your day. So what is the news saying? Well, Vogue Portugal released 4 covers last week for their July-August issue, with the goal of having a mental health focus. Most sources described the image as that of a psychiatric institution, where a patient is being bathed by 2 nurses. They titled it The Madness Issue, which had an IG caption with several lines about love and about life. Their Instagram tag concludes with #MadnessIssues. It's about time. So several commenters took to Instagram calling it strange and archaic image of mental illness, and some called it deeply stigmatizing. It gained attention with several commenters coming from, psychologists and even other models. The photographer or artist expressed that, it was their intention to highlight past inhumane practices rather than to celebrate what the photo was casting. The photographer and Vogue state that this is a portrayal of institutionalized psychiatry at its infancy. So our question is that true? Well, there's an interesting read by Dr. Jeffrey Lieberman, psychiatrist and former president of the American Psychiatric Association, where he spent some time sketching the history of what institutional psychiatry looked like. So I certainly recommend the book. It's an interesting read, but I'll summarize a few things from his chapter on this topic. The treatment of severe mental illness was almost exclusively done in institutions in the 1800s, where remission, think here, recovery, from symptoms was really hard to come by at psychiatry's infancy. So at the beginning of the 20th century, Dorothy Dix encouraged legislators to build asylums, and by 1904, there were 150,000 of them in the U.S. 40 years after that, there were nearly 3 times as many asylums. So one of these institutions, the largest of its kind, was said to hold 19,000 patients in a campus that was virtually a city. It had its own fire department, church, sewage, post office, athletics, cemetery, you name it, all situated in Brentwood, New York. Unfortunately, these institutions predominantly housed people because psychiatric tools for more substantial, enduring treatments didn't yet exist. And yes, the treatment of patients were quite poor and wretched, as Dr. Lieberman explains, and only made worse by inadequate funding at times, as it was often one of the highest ticket items for any state's budget. And it was often overrun with more patients than those facilities were even built to handle. So these early era psychiatrists with fairly poor and primitive tools tried to meet the prognosis of enduring misery with equally bold treatments. So many of their attempts to cure mental health issues would make the hair on our arms stand up. But some of this information comes to us from people who are misdiagnosed, who tell their story from the inside. So how does the Vogue image stand up to history? Well, in fact, it may be accurate about the history of the time. So in some ways, perhaps milder than some of the worst aspects documented. However, Vogue's image is also a picture of psychiatry's most naive and limited time in history. In many ways, it's part of our current cultural conversation. I mean, do we judge a thing, or in this case, it's representation of this past institution to inform our current conversation? So here are my thoughts based on the cover art and hashtags alone. So big disclaimer, I've not read the entire, magazine. So my concerns stem from the way that popular images can reinforce or challenge notions about the field of mental health as it's practiced today. I mean, it often takes families a great deal of time and effort to see me or other professionals who help people thrive from mental illness. And so nearly every day I meet families who feel conflicting feelings of relief for getting help for their child and guilt for not having connected sooner. And they may describe to me how their notions of mental health were very much formed by the imperfect science of our past or the media descriptions of our field, which tend to be pretty abysmal. So I expect that more people will see the Vogue title, and cover than read their magazine cover to cover. So in the service of presenting mental health, I might echo that Hamilton musical to ask them to not throw away their shot regarding presenting mental illness. Now, I've had the privilege of working with students and nurses who rotate in my clinic. And it's amazing to hear that they have discovered what I did, that working with kids, families, and adults is wonderful and life-giving. And so what are some ideas for working against the mental health stigma in the media and around you? And certainly encouraging the people in your life who might be struggling with mental illness, especially if they're sharing their own struggles and stories. If they're young people, definitely urge them to get help and enlist the help of their family members. We're certainly better together. Our stories are powerful. So uplifting someone who's had the courage to share their story can really make a difference. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be the one to share your story. I mean, some of us are called more to support those who do, or sometimes one's own, pain can help them to empathize with others who are suffering. All right, my friends, thanks again for checking back in. I want you to take good care and please be well.